What is going on, guys? Nate the Ape here, and today I've got a quick guide on how to get started with RetroPie 4.1 for the Raspberry Pi. So before we get started, we're going to go over a couple things that you're going to need to complete this project. If for whatever reason you already have everything, just go ahead and skip that by clicking one of the annotations located right in this area. So first thing you're going to need is a micro SD card reader or an SD card reader if you have an adapter. We'll also need a micro SD card, size of your choosing. This happens to be a 32 gigabyte. You'll also need a 2.5 amp power supply to run the Raspberry Pi 3. You'll need an HDMI cable, a protective case for your Raspberry Pi 3, and you also need a Raspberry Pi 3. This happens to be in a custom case that I printed in one of these printers behind me. Now, to control the Raspberry Pi 3, once you get the software installed, you'll need a controller of some sort. Today I'm going to show you how to connect a Bluetooth controller. This is the Razer Cerevel. If you want to use a wired controller, these will also work, such as the SNES USB controller. And last but not least, you'll also need a keyboard of some sort. Bluetooth or wired, it doesn't matter. All we need it for is to type in the wireless key when we get to that step. Now, we'll go ahead and cut over to the PC. All right, so here we are back at the PC, and first thing we're going to need to do is write the RetroPie image to the SD card. Now, I will include the links to all the software in the description below, so just check that out if you need to get anything. Let me show you the pages here. Here you'll find Win32 Disk Imager. Just go ahead and download and install this. This is what we use to install the image to the SD card. And from the RetroPie site, you can download your version of RetroPie that you want. RetroPie is available for the Raspberry Pi 1, the Raspberry Pi 2, the Raspberry Pi 3, and the Raspberry Pi 0. If you need the version for the Raspberry Pi 0 or 1, you'll want to download this version on the left here. And if you're looking for the version for the 2 or 3, you just want to download the version on the right. Now, since we are installing this on a Raspberry Pi 3, we went ahead and downloaded this version right here. So let's go ahead and minimize that. And the first thing we're going to need to do is plug in our micro SD adapter, which is right here with our card in it. We'll go ahead and plug that into the computer, like so. And what I like to do is I always open up my Explorer to go ahead and take a look at my drives. Now, just looking at my Explorer here, I'll notice this E drive is the SD card that I just installed into that I plugged into the computer, Win32 Disk Imager. Now, this step is very important because you can cause a lot of damage if you don't choose the right device. Since we know it's the E drive, we're going to go ahead and drop the device to E. If I happen to leave this on H, I could possibly overwrite everything on my external drive. So it's very important that you choose the correct device. Next thing we need to do is go ahead and select the image that we're going to write to the SD card. You do that by clicking the little blue folder, going into the folder where you saved your image, and select it here and hit open. You'll notice it fills in the path here to the image. We double check the device just to make sure, and then just go ahead and click write. It'll tell you that it's going to go ahead and wipe the entire device and write over it. So we'll click yes. It unmounts the drive and it will start writing the image. Now I'm just going to go ahead and fast forward this, and when it's done, we'll come back. Alright, so our image is finished writing to the SD card. It took maybe 3 or 4 minutes, but it's completed. So at this point, what we'll need to do is open up our File Explorer, go down to our E drive that we just wrote, and you want to right click and eject the drive. This is a very important step. Raspberry Pi OSs are very picky, and they're easily corruptible on SD cards. So anytime you remove the SD card from either the Raspberry Pi or the computer, you want to make sure you eject it properly. On the computer, you'll want to do it as I just showed you, and on the Raspberry Pi, you want to make sure you shut it down before you ever remove the SD card. So at this point, let's go ahead and cut over to the Raspberry Pi and we'll go ahead and get started. Alright, so now we have the micro SD card installed in the Raspberry Pi and it is booting up for the first time. You'll see it go through the command prompt there, and then you'll have the splash screen for RetroPie come up. So it'll take a few minutes during the first setup, but we'll just go ahead and wait for it to complete. Once it's finished, it'll probably come up and ask us to set up our controller. For this controller, I'm going to go ahead and just plug in the keyboard, and that way I can easily navigate the file system. Let me go ahead and switch my input on my TV to the Raspberry Pi. Alright, now it's telling us no gamepads detected, which is fine because we just have a keyboard installed. What you'll need to do is just hold down a key on your keyboard, and that will show you configuring keyboard. Now what I like to do is just use the arrows on the right hand of the keyboard to set this up, down, left, right. For start and select, I use V and B. For the action buttons, I use A, S, X, and Z. Left shoulder, right shoulder, left trigger, all of those, I just go ahead and skip them. To skip a button during this configuration, all you need to do is hold down one of the buttons that you've already configured. So we can just hold down the left directional button, and we'll just go ahead and skip through this list here. Okay, and once we get to OK, we'll just go ahead and hit our A button to confirm, and it loads up into RetroPie. So at this point, what we'll need to do is configure RetroPie. Now to configure RetroPie, we'll just need to go ahead and select the RetroPie tab. Scroll down to RaspPi config and select that using A. And from here, we have a few things that we'll need to go ahead and do. First thing I suggest anytime you install an operating system on a Raspberry Pi is always change the user password. It is default on most OSs for the Raspberry Pi. So what we'll want to do is select that. We'll be asked to enter a new password. On this one, we'll just go ahead and enter the password. Forgive me if I'm looking down, I've got the keyboard on my lap. Try that again. All right, and we get a password change successfully. Next thing you can do is head over to Advanced Options. And under Overscan, if you notice, we have all of these black bars around the border. You want to choose Overscan. It asks if we want to enable compensation for displays with Overscan. You'll hit No. What that'll do is that'll disable it. Now, because I'm using a capture card, you may still see this, so we'll just go ahead and hit OK. And it will take a reboot to take effect. So next thing we'll want to do is go into Advanced Options again. And this is completely up to you on this one. Under hostname, you can actually change the name of the Raspberry Pi, but you'll want to remember that name in case you ever want to access it over the network. For this tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead and leave it at RetroPie. So let's go ahead and back out. And the last thing that we'll want to do in this menu is expand the file system. What this does is it uses the entire SD card for storage. Whereas when you first install it, it's only using a portion of that SD card. If you don't do this, you can quickly fill up the SD card, causing all sorts of issues in RetroPie. So we'll just go ahead and hit Expand File System. You'll see a little bit of code scroll through there. And it'll say the file system will be enlarged upon next reboot. We'll go ahead and hit OK. And we will choose Finish. It asks if we want to reboot now. Let's go ahead and click yes. And I'll just go ahead and fast forward through this real quick while the Raspberry Pi is rebooting. All right, and so our RetroPie is now rebooted. We've changed the password, expanded the file system, turned off overscan, and you'll notice all of those black bars around the edge are now gone. So at this point, let's go ahead and configure the Bluetooth controller and the wireless. Let's go ahead and start with the wireless. To do that, we'll go ahead and select RetroPie again. We'll scroll down to Wi-Fi and select Wi-Fi with the A button that we configured during the startup procedure. And from here, all we need to do is connect to Wi-Fi, scroll to our Wi-Fi network, and type in our wireless password. Once done, I just say connecting. And if the connection was successful, you'll see a current IP address along with your wireless SSID showing that you are now connected to the wireless network. At this point, we can go ahead and hit exit, which will return us to the RetroPie config window. And let's go ahead and connect our Bluetooth controller. To connect a Bluetooth controller, we'll scroll up to Bluetooth. Go ahead and click on that using the A button. And from this menu, all we need to do is go ahead and register and connect to a Bluetooth device. We'll click that. Make sure your device is in Bluetooth pairing mode. On the Razer Serval, it happens to be holding down these two buttons right here. Okay. Let's go ahead and back out and search one more time. I didn't have my controller in pairing mode before I selected that. All right, and we have a new one. So we have this one at the top, which is most likely our Razer controller. Best thing to do is choose the first one and then make your way down the list if it doesn't work the first time. So we'll select the first one first. All right, it says it's successfully connected to, and that would be the MAC address of the Bluetooth device. We can go ahead and enter again. At this point, on the Razer controller, I do have one green LED showing it is connected to a device. And we can go ahead and hit cancel. You can use that to connect to any Bluetooth device. You notice I had many Bluetooth devices in the list there. A lot of those were light bulbs, echoes, things like that. So we'll go ahead and hit cancel to leave this. And at this point, what we'll want to do is configure our Bluetooth controller that we just set up. To configure that, we'll hit the button that we set up for start on our keyboard. We'll scroll down to configure input, hit the A button, and it'll tell us now that we have one gamepad detected. I'm just going to set my keyboard off to the side here and grab my controller. Now it's telling us we'll need to hit a button on our controller. It's detecting the controller. We'll go ahead and type in each of our buttons. Left shoulder, right shoulder. Now, the Razer Serval doesn't, I haven't been able to get it to work 100% with RetroPie. All of the analog buttons work just fine, but the triggers don't seem to work very well. So I'm just going to go ahead and skip the analog triggers. I will click the left thumb and the right thumb. And then I'm just going to go ahead and skip the rest of the buttons here as well. I believe the controller does work with the sticks, but I'm not going to configure them right now because I only plan on using the D-pad for now. So, as we can see now on our controller, everything is working. And we'll go ahead and back out. So at this point, we have everything configured in RetroPie before we need to start transferring ROMs. The software already has the emulators installed, so what we'll need to do is go back to the computer And we'll go ahead and I'll show you how to do FTP into the RetroPie so that you don't have to constantly move a USB key between your computer and your RetroPie every time you want to update it with ROMs. So let's go ahead and cut right over to the PC and I'll show you that. Alright, so here we are back at the PC. Now, like I said, we're going to go over how to transfer your ROMs over the wireless network or wired to the RetroPie so that you don't have to constantly run a USB key from your PC to your RetroPie every time you want to move ROMs. To do this, we're going to use an FTP client. I happen to use FileZilla. I'll include the link to the description below if you'd like to go and download this, or you can use your favorite FTP client of choice. So I already have it downloaded. I'm just going to go ahead and minimize this and open up FileZilla. Alright, so at this point we've got FileZilla open, and I'll just show you a quick overview of this software here. On the left side, we have our local site. This is also known as your computer. And this is where you'll browse your files and look for your ROMs. On the right side is our remote site. This would be the RetroPie once we get connected to it. Now to quickly connect to it, you'll just want to go up to the host name up here. You'll type RetroPie for the user. Alright, hold up, Nate. So let's go ahead and explain this a little bit further. Where we entered RetroPie into the host, there are two things that I wanted to explain a little bit more. So RetroPie is the host name for your RetroPie. So what we'll want to do is enter the host name that you entered in the RasPi config. If you left it default, then just go ahead and use RetroPie. If you happen to change it, you'll want to use the name that you selected. The other thing is that doesn't always work. Depending on your operating system, you'll need an extra service to find the name of the device. On Windows 10, that's built in. It's called Bonjour, and it will search for the host name on the network. So we just enter RetroPie, it searches for it, finds its IP address, and just connects right to the device. On Windows 7, you'll have to install an extra piece of software. Once again, I'll include the link below, and all you'll need to do is download the Bonjour print service, install it, and then you can continue as the other me showed you. Username, make sure this is lowercase pi. Password, if you happen to change this during the configuration process, you want to make sure you type the password that you set. So I'll go and type that now. And for the port, we're going to use port 22. And then you can click Quick Connect. It'll come up with an unknown host key. Just go ahead and add the key to the cache and hit OK. And at this point, we are now connected to our RetroPie. You'll see our folders right here. And on the left side, I already have my ROMs folder selected with D-Pad Hero 2 for the NES. I cannot tell you where to download ROMs from. It's illegal, so I'm not going to even go there. This happens to be a homebrew game, so if you want to look it up, feel free to. So I'm going to go ahead and go into RetroPie, ROMs, and we're going to scroll down to our NES folder. Let's go ahead and extract our D-Pad Hero from this here. And now we have D-Pad Hero 2.NES. So we'll go ahead and just refresh that. And now we have D-Pad Hero 2.NES. We'll go ahead and move this over to the NES folder. And to move it over, you can either right click it and hit upload, which will upload it to the remote site, or you can click and hold and just drag it right over to the other side. Now at this point, all we need to do is go ahead and cut back over to the Raspberry Pi, like so. We'll go ahead and hit the start button that we configured during our controller setup. We'll scroll down to quit and hit restart emulation station. This step is needed anytime you load new ROMs onto the system. Once we hit restart emulation station, we should now have a new tab for Nintendo. We can click on Nintendo, and there's D-Pad Hero 2. Now I'm going to show you one thing real quick whenever you go to launch a game. If you go ahead and launch a ROM and it doesn't launch, it takes you right back to RetroPie. You could have an issue with the ROM, say it's corrupted or it's a bad ROM. Another thing is maybe the emulator that's being used isn't compatible. For whatever reason, it happens. So what you can do is go ahead and click on the ROM. When this pops up, go ahead and press a button on your controller real quick, and you'll get a little list right here. Now what you want to do is select different emulator for the ROM, for that emulator. And you can just select these right here and select either of the emulators that you want to use. I'm going to go and leave it at default though, because I haven't had any issues. And I'm just going to go ahead and click launch. Now you'll see dpadhero.com presents a link to the pads. And it'll go ahead and launch the game. Now to exit the game real quick, you'll hit the start and select buttons that you configured. And that'll pop you right out of the game. Now let's go ahead and go over a couple extra things. You know how to add ROMs, you know how to exit the ROMs, you know how to change the emulator if you have any issues. So what we'll do now is a little bit of customization. Now, in order to change the themes on your RetroPie, you'll go into RetroPie here, and you'll just go right here to ES themes. This is going to come up with another screen. And I'm just going to go and switch the inputs on my monitor so that I can do this on my main monitor real quick. It's going to tell you if you wish to run more than 10 systems on themes other than Carbon, Pixel, Endura, TurtlePie, Canela variants, you run the risk of getting a white screen of death. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If you're going to have more than 10 systems running, go ahead and use one of those themes preferably. So we're just going to go and hit OK. By default, Carbon is the default theme whenever you install RetroPie 4.1. I prefer to install Pixel metadata. All you need to do is scroll down to the theme that you want and click on it. It'll start scrolling through and it will download the theme from GitHub. And now you'll see update or uninstall Pixel metadata. At this point, you can just go ahead and hit cancel. And it will close out of the ES themes program that was running. To apply the theme, you can go back with the start button on our controller and go down to UI settings. Then we'll go ahead and go down here to theme set, select Pixel metadata, and hit back. After a few seconds, you'll notice the back screen changes and we can go back. And we have our systems here. Although it looks like we're missing a little bit of information. So let's go ahead and go back into RetroPie. And there we go. We're in there, backed out, and now it's loaded the rest of the artwork. This does happen from time to time, so if you ever experience that, reboot the system or go into another screen and come back, and sometimes it'll load. So now we see our Pixel theme. And what this will do, the metadata, is if the metadata is loaded for a particular ROM, it will load up on the right-hand side of the screen, giving you a little bit of artwork, description of the game, rating, etc. So I prefer this one. I think it looks a little bit nicer on my system. So last thing we're going to do, and this is a little bit of a bonus, you don't have to do this. This has nothing to do with the games, but I usually do it because it adds a little bit of functionality to the RetroPie system once you get everything set up. So what we're going to do is go into RetroPie, and from here, we're going to go ahead and install extra software through the RetroPie config. We're going to go ahead and look at two different pieces of software, one of those being Kodi, and the other being alternate emulators. So we're going to go ahead and go down to RetroPie Setup and hit select, and it's going to go ahead and load that program for us. And it's going to give us a little bit of a warning. It says, if you bought this software, get your money back, because this software is completely free. And if you bought this software from somebody, let the developers know because they'd like to go and put an end to that. So let's go ahead and skip past that. And we're going to scroll down to Manage Packages. We're going to go ahead and scroll down to Manage Optional Packages. And from here, we can actually go ahead and download other emulators for our systems. Say there's an emulator that works better with a certain ROM, you just find it in this list and you can go ahead and install it. But what we're going to do is scroll down this list and we're going to look for Kodi. There we go. We have Kodi. We'll just go ahead and hit our A button to select it. And we have the option to install from binary. So we're going to go ahead and hit install. And this will take a few minutes. It's going to reach out to the internet, grab all the package files, compile them, install them, and we should be good to go. So I'll go ahead and fast forward at this point, and we'll come back once it's finished installing. All right, and the Kodi package has installed, so we can go ahead and back out now. Choose back. Choose back one more time, and then we'll go ahead and hit exit. This will return us back to the RetroPie screen, and from here we can go ahead and back out. And just like ROMs, you'll notice we have nothing showing Kodi on the screen here. Once again, what you'll need to do is hit the start button, scroll down to quit, and choose Restart Emulation Station. This will reload all of the ROMs and software that was installed. And now you'll see we have this little ports icon here. We'll choose ports, and you'll see Kodi. Click the button, and it will launch Kodi. Now you can use this for all of your home theater stuff. You can load your network movies, things like that on it, and you'll see. Here we go. It did load the newest version of Kodi as well. And to close this is a little bit different than what we have for the ROMs. You actually can't click the start button and the select button to close this. What you'll need to do is scroll up to power and hit the exit option. Now, for some reason, that didn't work on my controller, so I just did it from the keyboard real quick. And you'll see we're back at the RetroPie. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was informational, instructional even. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, go ahead and leave a like, comment, and leave me some suggestions on if there's anything else that you guys would like to see with RetroPie or any other videos. Probably do anything tech related. You'll see a little bit of gaming on my channel, maybe even a little bit of 3D printing, who knows. And I hope to see you guys next time.